Coming up on this Monday edition of Newsline at noon, on the last day of his visit to Korea, Pope Francis calls on Seoul and Pyongyang to work towards peace and reconciliation. Seoul and Washington start their joint military Ulchi Freedom Guardian exercise despite North Korea's threats of preemptive strikes. Plus 17 Ebola patients have fled a quarantine center in Liberia after assailants attacked the facility, stealing contaminated mattresses and equipment. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
It's new Monday, August 18th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Ojin Ju.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. We start with Pope Francis's visit to Korea, which wraps up in about half an hour's time. The Pope is well known and deeply popular around the world for reaching out to the marginalized and the vulnerable, and his gestures during his 5-day stay in Korea have reflected his special love for those in need.
He listened to the nation's young, disabled, and the poor, but his care for families of Seoul ferry victims still in despair for the deaths of their young sons and daughters was most evident. Park Ji-won tells us more.
Despite his busy 5-day schedule in Korea, the Pope's special love and care for the bereaved families of April's Seoul ferry disaster was evident. His first encounter came last Friday in Daejeon, right before the Pope celebrated his first Mass with the Korean public. During the meeting, the families of the victims gave him a yellow ribbon, symbolizing the hope of the bereaved families, and the pontiff wore the ribbon right away.
We were heartbroken and deeply hurt by the accident. I really wanted to say thanks to the Pope for meeting us. When I saw him wearing the yellow ribbon during the Mass, I was really surprised. I felt renewed strength to go down this difficult path.
Pope Francis wrapped up the Mass with a special prayer for the victims.
In the sinking of the Seoul ferry.
On Saturday, during an open car parade before a beatification mass in Seoul's Gwanghwamun Square, Pope Francis got out of the car and walked towards family members where around 600 had been specially invited. He held hands with the father of a student victim who has been on hunger strike for about a month, urging the parliament to pass a special bill on the disaster to find out the exact cause of the sinking. The man gave the Pope a letter, and he put the letter into his pocket. And on Sunday, Pope Francis baptized another family member of the ferry victims, Lee Ho-jin, upon the request of Lee. It's extremely rare for the Pope to baptize a laity member, but the Pope Francis decided to do it to try and heal his wounded heart. The cross that Lee carried during a month-long pilgrimage over the country was delivered to the Pope, and he will take it back to the Vatican. The Pope's genuine listening not only consoled the hearts of the family members, but also the Korean public who witnessed his gentle love for the suffering families. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, Pope Francis wraps up his 5-day trip to South Korea on this Monday, and he did so with a special Mass at Seoul's Myeongdong Cathedral, where peace and reconciliation was the theme.
And reflecting that, the Pope urged the two Koreas to forgive one another and engage in sincere dialogue to end the hostilities and military conflicts. Connie Kim has the story.
Pope Francis brought to a close his 5-day trip with a peace and reconciliation Mass at Myeongdong Cathedral in Seoul. After entering the church, the Pope reached out to 7 women seated in the front who were forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during World War II. The pontiff took time to listen to them and adorned a badge that was given to him by one of the former sex slaves. In his address to the hundreds in attendance, Pope Francis conveyed a message of forgiveness. Referring to Korea, a nation divided for more than 60 years, the Pope called for dialogue between the North and the South and said they're brothers and sisters and members of the same family. Pope Francis' final public event in Korea was attended by about 1,000 people. Reflecting the pontiff's great interest in the marginalized and poor, they ranged from North Korean defectors and immigrant workers to the survivors and bereaved families of victims from April's ferry disaster. President Park Geun-hye was also present, making it her third meeting with the Pope during his Korea trip. Before the Mass at Myeongdong Cathedral, Pope Francis met with the leaders of other religious groups in Korea, including Buddhists and Protestants, and emphasized the importance of harmony. Prior to his departure for the Vatican this afternoon, the pontiff will pay tribute to Korean Catholic martyrs at the Myeongdong Cathedral sanctuary. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And in other news, South Korea and the U.S. began their annual military exercise dubbed Ulchi Freedom Guardian this morning amid threats from North Korea. Pyongyang has condemned the drills as a declaration of nuclear war, but Seoul says any provocations by the North will be dealt with strongly and swiftly. Kim Min-ji reports.
South Korea and the United States kicked off their annual military exercise on Monday. The computer simulation-aided joint Ulchi Freedom Guardian drills, which run through next Friday, mobilizes roughly 50,000 South Korean and 30,000 U.S. troops. The main purpose of the exercise is to maintain security on the Korean peninsula while upholding joint defense capabilities between the two allies. This year, the exercise will involve the testing of a new tailored strategy, which is aimed at deterring North Korea's nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction. The strategy drawn up at a security consultative meeting last year stipulates diplomatic and military responses at different levels of threats posed by Pyongyang during times of peace or war. And like years gone by, the military exercise comes amid threats from North Korea. Pyongyang on Monday condemned the drill as a declaration of nuclear war. North Korea's Rodong Sinmun said the exercises violate peace on the peninsula, calling it a provocative act that hurts inter-Korean relations. The newspaper added that Seoul and Washington will be to blame for unpredictable situations on the Korean peninsula. Pyongyang also warned merciless preemptive attacks on Seoul during the weekend. The North has long denounced the exercise as a rehearsal for war against Pyongyang, while Seoul insists the drills are defensive in nature. South Korea's military said the exercise will go forward as planned amid strengthened surveillance and security against the North, adding that Seoul will respond firmly and without hesitation if the North engages in any form of provocation. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
With Seoul and Tokyo expected to hold another round of talks on the issue of Japan's wartime sex slavery later this month, Korea's Foreign Ministry has set up a task force to deal with historical issues regarding Japan. The three-member task force under the Northeast Asian Affairs Bureau will be in charge of studying and systemizing Japan's stance on its wartime wrongdoings, including its wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women and false claims over Korea's Dokdo Island. Relations between the two sides have hit new lows in recent months due to Tokyo's historical and territorial claims.
Now, for months, the government has warned that Korea is in danger of falling into a low, slow growth trap. So, who should shoulder the blame for this lackluster growth? According to a new survey of the nation's top conglomerates, the blame lies squarely on the National Assembly. Hwang Jae has the details.
A new survey suggests Korea's legislative branch is to blame for the stall in government efforts to spur growth. More than 80% of the nation's 30 biggest conglomerates surveyed by the Joseonilbo Daily said the National Assembly was stifling economic progress. They pointed to the delayed passage of major economic stimulus bills as the reason. More than half of the companies said they would expand investments and hire more employees once the related legislation passes. Earlier this month, Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan urged the parliament to pass 30 long-pending stimulus bills as soon as possible. 19 of them have been awaiting approval by the National Assembly for more than a year now. After Finance Minister Choi took office in mid-July, the government laid out a set of aggressive stimulus measures, expressing concerns about the possibility of a long, low-growth trend resembling that of Japan. Hwang Jae, Arirang News.
After Korea's central bank lowered the benchmark interest rate just last week for the first time in well over a year, commercial banks are now following suit. This is raising concerns. The average deposit interest rate might fall below the 2% mark. This could adversely affect the elderly who lean very heavily on interest given by banks. Our Kim Chan-ju has more.
These days, it's considered almost impossible to save a decent amount of money from the interest given by local banks.
I'm having a hard time making ends meet because the interest rate can't catch up with inflation.
Deposit interest rates here in Korea have dropped sharply over the last 6 years. The one-year fixed deposit rate that reached 5.87% in 2008 slipped to 2.68% in June. The rate has continued tumbling over the last 2 months, with most commercial banks currently offering interest rates in the low 2% range. But experts predict they'll go down even further after the Bank of Korea cut the benchmark interest rate by 0.25 percentage point to 2.25% last week. They say it might not be long before interest rates are in the 1% range, since the local economy is not showing strong enough signs of improvement.
We'll closely monitor the effects of the rate cut and come up with appropriate measures to deal with changes to consumer behavior and household debt.
Japan already experienced a similar situation and entered an ultra-low interest rate era a long time ago. Its 1 to 3 year fixed deposit rate averaged just 0.35% at its highest. The elderly suffered the most since many of them live off the interest on their savings. Local economists say Korea should come up with countermeasures such as raising pensions if it wants to avoid social and economic problems stemming from low interest. Kim Chan-ju, Arirang News.
Now, debt holders, of course, welcome the rate cut. The Financial Supervisory Service expects households and companies to pay around $1.8 billion less in interest payments annually as a result. The rate cut is expected to reduce local banks' profits in the short term, but an official from the FSS told reporters that the profitability of the banks will improve longer term, as the move will decrease the likelihood of defaults by lenders.
And in today's Industry Insight, we talk about fast fashion brands, officially called SPA brands. Korean companies can be seen as latecomers into this industry, but despite that, they seem to have high aims to be a leading global brand.
Yes, and for more on this, our Connie Lee joins us in the studio. Hello, Connie.
Hey, guys.
So, first, we all want to know, what does SPA stand for?
Well, Mark, it's a bit of a mouthful. SPA stands for Specialty Retailer of Private Label Apparel. Got that? And simply, they're the brands that sell trendy items at competitive prices. Now, currently, these SPA brands, or fast fashion brands, take up about 8% of the fashion industry here in Korea, but they do have the potential to grow even more. And despite the tight competition, the local SPA brands are fighting on to rival on their foreign counterparts here in Korea, as they also aim to go global. Here's a closer look.
They are the so-called fast fashion brands, or SPA brands, easily seen in Seoul's busy shopping districts. Over the past couple of years in Korea, there's been a growing demand for these SPA brands, with both foreign and domestic firms flooding the streets here in Korea.
I like these kinds of brands because their prices are reasonable and they have styles that are liked by most people.
SPA, short for Specialty Retailer of Private Label Apparel, had a market worth of about 500 billion won in the Korean market back in 2008, but has since grown to about 3 trillion won, or about $2.8 billion in 2013.
The SPA brands are changing the paradigm of the fashion industry in Korea. Before, we saw brands more focused on their brand image, but now it's about the retail store's image and how to meet the exact demands of its customers.
SPA brands do it all, from design to manufacturing and retailing. Thus, the prices are lower, and new items can be produced at a faster rate.
For many of these retail stores of SPA brands, there are new products that come in almost weekly. And for this store, apparently there are new products that are delivered every day.
Currently, the three biggest SPA brands in Korea are not homemade. They are Japan's Uniqlo, one of the first SPA brands to enter Korea in 2005, and Spain's Zara, and Sweden's H&M. The local brands, which are latecomers to the SPA world, however, are not afraid to join in on the competition. Retail conglomerate Elan Group, which introduced Korea's first SPA brand called Spao in 2009, currently has more than 10 such brands under its belt. Their aim is global expansion, first by conquering Asia.
We found success with our first stores abroad in China and Japan, so we now plan to increase the number of our SPA brand stores in China to 50 next year. We have an edge over our foreign competitors because we design and produce according to the specific tastes of our Asian consumers.
And back in Korea, the already diluted market of SPA brands is still vied by newcomers from abroad. Canadian label Joe Fresh was recently introduced, and the UK's popular Topshop are apparently eyeing the market.
Global companies could see Korea as a test market, as Korean consumers are now recognized as trendsetters and fast adapters.
Well, that expert who works with a lot of high-profile foreign brands here in Korea, he says that they're very keen with what Korean consumers want because they are able to influence big fashion markets like those in China.
And Connie, the success of these SPA brands in Korea has led more foreign brands to eye the Korean market, to come into the Korean market, such as Canada's Joe Fresh that's already in Korea. And I would definitely want to see Topshop here in Korea, opening store here in Korea.
Right, and last year, the three biggest SPA brands, which were all foreign, were Uniqlo, Zara, and H&M. And last year, they actually saw record-breaking sales. Now, according to the Financial Supervisory Service, the total sales of the top three brands last year topped 1 trillion won, or that's more than $980 million US. Now, that number is up nearly 31% from the year before, so that's quite an increase.
Well, those three clothing stores you just mentioned there, Uniqlo, H&M, and Zara, yeah, they're all huge here in Korea, as they are in many other countries around the world. How can local Korean brands catch up to these extremely popular and well-established foreign brands then?
Well, according to the experts I talked to, the key is good researched marketing, especially in today's digital, fast-changing world. Now, a new idea that successful brands are using today is called omni-channel marketing, which is marketing to consumers on multiple platforms or on multiple devices. For example, retailers can offer sales online and have the consumers pick up the item in the store. And once that consumer is inside the store, the retailers can then send a text message of a coupon or another discount offer to that consumer of an apparel or item that the consumer had bought before. So it's very targeted marketing.
Well, it certainly sounds like they know how to target each shopper specifically and adjust everything for their needs. Connie, thanks very much for your report.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Well, it's time now for a look through the international headlines we're following on this Monday afternoon. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, who's standing by at the News Center.
Eunice, concerns are rising in Liberia that the Ebola outbreak there could grow even larger after a quarantine center there was looted.
That's right, Jinju. Early reports have said as many as 30 patients under observation for Ebola had fled the center as it was being attacked. There are now conflicting reports on that figure, as a senior health official said all of the patients were moved to another medical facility. Saturday evening, local time, looters reportedly called Ebola a hoax as they took soiled sheets, mattresses, and medical equipment from the center likely infected with the contagion, raising concerns of an expanded infection risk. An estimated 50,000 people reside in the West Point neighborhood, the largest slum in Liberia's capital. Liberia, among the world's least developed countries, has seen a growing number of Ebola cases. The latest WHO update said 116 new cases were registered between Tuesday and Wednesday alone. The strike is seen as a huge setback in the struggle to contain the Ebola. With an overstretched medical staff and little food and medical supplies coming in, the Liberian government has quarantined remote areas as plague villages, stoking distrust among the people. And there are new clashes, intense clashes happening right now between protesters and police in Ferguson, Missouri, the U.S. city that has been gripped by racial tensions since the shooting death of 18-year-old Michael Brown. Reports say several tear gas canisters were thrown in multiple directions by police in a major intersection where crowds had gathered to protest what they perceived as racially motivated police violence. The unarmed African-American teen was shot and killed by a white police officer some 9 days ago. Earlier, a federal autopsy was ordered on Michael Brown. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder cited extraordinary circumstances surrounding his death, as well as his family's request in ordering it. Early Sunday, the first round of curfews installed by the state governor did not hold. 7 people were arrested and at least one person was reported to be in critical condition due to a gun wound, though reportedly not by authorities this time. And turning now to events in Iraq, Kurdish Peshmerga fighters are engaged in a fierce battle with Islamic State insurgents to reclaim Iraq's largest dam in Mosul. A Kurdish official said most of the surrounding area had been seized as Peshmerga fighters pushed for control of the Mosul dam. Reuters reports residents in the region were told to leave by Islamic State militants who planted bombs alongside roads leading in and out of the facility. Peshmerga forces were clearing those booby traps as U.S. airstrikes hit IS checkpoints and vehicles in the area. The militants had seized Mosul Dam some 10 days ago, triggering concerns they could use the major source of water and power to flood regions downstream. Kurdish forces are also making ground in other northern regions. They retook 2 majority Christian towns 30 kilometers from Mosul. And another Ukrainian fighter jet has been shot down by pro-Russian separatists, this time over the region of Luhansk. A Ukrainian military spokesman said the pilot ejected out of the plane and was taken to a secure location. This as a Russian convoy of humanitarian goods arrived at a border checkpoint near Donetsk. Kiev has inspected the first group of trucks and agreed to let them proceed with the guidance of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Meanwhile, a 5-hour meeting of foreign ministers from Ukraine, Russia, Germany, and France in Berlin yielded limited progress. Follow-up meetings are expected to find an end to the crisis.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about...
It's no longer legal for website operators in Korea to store the registration numbers of users on their servers. A 2-year grace period that was granted for portals to voluntarily delete the ID numbers expired over the weekend. The move, part of a data privacy law that is meant to prevent identity theft, was enacted after hackers leaked the personal information of millions of credit card customers earlier this year. The Korea Communications Commission says it will begin its inspections on portals with daily visitors of over 100,000. Those found violating the law face fines of up to nearly $30,000 US.
Now to some very welcome sports news. It took to sudden death, but Korean golfer Park In-bi has won the 2014 Wegmans LPGA Championships, trailing American Brittany Lincicome by a single stroke going into the final round. Park finished off the final round at 11 under par overall, but her American rival would bogey on the 18th, forcing a sudden death playoff between the two. Park seized the moment with a birdie besting the Americans' par. The victory is Park's first LPGA Tour major win of the season and her second straight at the Wegmans.
Murky day continues along with nationwide showers today, and depending on the regions, you could receive light drizzle to heavy downpours. So the upper parts of the peninsula will see on and off light rain, while the southern areas will see heavy showers of up to 120 millimeters. In fact, a heavy rain alert is still in place of many areas down south. So if you're in those areas, be cautious of heavy rainfall. And the nationwide rain will drop the temperatures a couple of degrees lower than yesterday, leaving temperatures at about 25 degrees Celsius in many areas. So let's take a closer look. The afternoon high in Seoul, Daegu, and Gwangju will rise to 25, while Busan will have a daily high of 24 this afternoon. And for other regions, Jeju should get up to 28, Daejeon will top out at 24, while Mount Keungang reaches at 16. Well, that's all from me today, and back to you guys in the studio.
Well, thank you very much, as always, Jian, for the weather there. And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Our next newscast will be at 2 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.